Noah, don't forget your lunch. Ellie Morrison hurried toward the front door, grabbing the lunchbox left on the kitchen counter. Sorry, Mom, coming right now. Noah's voice came from the bathroom. At 12 years old, her son had grown taller. Which city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And hey, make sure you watch till the end. Something's going to happen that you won't see coming. And his voice was starting to deepen. Still, mornings were always hectic. Ellie glanced at the clock and let out a small sigh. If they didn't leave in the next 15 minutes, she'd be late for her hospital shift. Hurry up, you'll miss the bus. Ellie called out. When Noah rushed out with his hair still wet, Ellie couldn't help but smile. It had been 5 years since her divorce, and every day had been like this since she started living alone with her son. But with Noah's cheerful personality, Ellie had somehow managed to get through each day as a single mother. Mom, can I go to Jason's house after school today? Noah asked, stuffing his lunchbox into his backpack. What about homework? I'll finish it all before I go. I promise, Noah said with a grin. Ellie thought for a moment, then nodded. All right, but be home by dinner time. Thanks, Mom. Noah shouted as he ran toward the front door. Ellie quickly grabbed her own bag and followed after him. She worked as a nurse at the local general hospital, and though her job was busy, she was grateful her regular shifts allowed her to attend most of Noah's school events. Her nurse's salary wasn't particularly high, but it was enough to support the two of them. Still, Ellie could barely save anything, and she constantly worried about the future. After the divorce, child support from her ex-husband, Greg, had become a regular, forcing Ellie to become financially and emotionally independent. After seeing Noah off at the bus stop, Ellie got into her car. During the 15-minute drive to the hospital, she usually organized the day's plans in her head. Today, she had a shift until evening, after which she would prepare Noah's dinner and do the laundry. Her mother, Deborah's birthday party was coming up this weekend. But that was yet another worry. Deborah, at 60, ran a successful real estate business and was known as one of the wealthiest people in town. She always demanded perfection and had high expectations for her daughters. Deborah had repeatedly told Ellie to get it together while treating her younger sister, Rachel, with favoritism. That difference remained unchanged. Rachel lived with her husband, Michael, and their 16-year-old daughter, Emma, in a nice house in the suburbs. Michael worked for a prominent local company, and Rachel's family enjoyed a comfortable financial life. Despite this, Deborah frequently provided Rachel's family with financial assistance. Why Rachel? Ellie murmured to herself, but quickly dismissed the thought. There was no point in making comparisons now. What mattered was her life with Noah. What Ellie could never understand was why her mother would lavish expensive gifts on Rachel's daughter, Emma, while only giving practical items to Noah, even though both were her grandchildren. Parking her car in the hospital lot, Ellie took a deep breath. Many patients needed her today, and she had to set aside her personal worries to focus on her duties as a nurse. Good morning, Ellie. Her colleague, Sarah, waved to her in the hospital lobby. Morning, Sarah. How's it going today? Ellie asked, trying to sound upbeat. It's busy. The emergency room is full, and new patients keep coming in, Sarah replied. Ellie nodded and headed to the staff room. After changing into her uniform and neatly putting up her hair, she pinned her name tag to her chest. Here, she was neither a mother nor a daughter, but a professional healthcare worker. There was a certain comfort in that. That afternoon, while Ellie was checking a patient's chart, her smartphone rang. It was Rachel calling. What is it? This is unusual, Ellie said as she picked up the phone. About Mom's birthday party. Can you help on Saturday? Rachel's voice came through, casual and yet pointed. Ellie hesitated slightly but eventually agreed. All right. What time should I come around? 10 in the morning would be great. Oh, and Rachel paused. Mom mentioned she wants to discuss Emma's study abroad in England. Ellie frowned. Emma studying abroad in England? This was the first she'd heard of it. It's still in the planning stages, but Mom says she'll support it, understanding the implication. Ellie felt a bitter taste in her mouth. Once again, her mother was planning to provide financial assistance to Rachel's family, while Noah had asked about college and Deborah had simply told him to look for scholarships. I see. Let's meet on Saturday then, Ellie finally said, her voice tinged with resignation. After hanging up, Ellie took another deep breath. She should be used to this by now, but there was always a small pain lingering in her heart. Still, she had no choice but to keep moving forward for Noah's sake and for her own. Ellie was in the ward, checking a patient's blood pressure when her smartphone rang again. This time, it was an unfamiliar number. Hello, is this Elizabeth Morrison? The voice on the other end was tense. Yes, this is she. This is Nurse Smith from Central Middle School. I'm calling about Noah. Ellie's heart stopped for a moment. Noah? Did something happen? He was in an accident after school today. He's been taken to STT, Mary's General Hospital emergency room. Could you come right away? The blood drained from Ellie's face. Accident? She could barely breathe. What kind of accident? He was hit by a car while crossing at a crosswalk. The hospital will give you more details. Ellie felt the ground beneath her shake. Her hands trembled as she quickly ended the call and ran toward the parking lot. She barely registered the concerned glances of her colleagues as she rushed out. The door. Noah, her son, had been hit by a car. In her car. The drive to STT, Mary's, felt like an eternity. The fear that something might happen to her son consumed her. Please, let him be okay, Ellie thought, praying silently at every red light. Noah had always been strong for her sake. The fear that his life might be in danger felt like it was consuming her whole body. When Ellie reached the emergency entrance of STT, Mary's hospital, she rushed to the reception desk. I need to know about Noah. He was brought in from a traffic accident. Ellie's voice was desperate. The receptionist quickly guided her to the emergency treatment area. Ellie's mind was numb as she walked down the hall. Just as she reached the treatment room, a young doctor in a white coat approached her. You must be Noah's mother. I'm Dr. Carter. My son, how is he? Ellie demanded, her heart racing. Dr. Carter began explaining, his voice calm yet urgent. Noah was hit by a car from the right side. As a result, he has a complex fracture of his right arm and internal bleeding. The CT scan also shows liver damage. We're currently stopping the bleeding, but emergency surgery is needed. Ellie, a nurse herself, understood the gravity of the situation immediately. Internal bleeding, liver damage. It was life-threatening. Surgery right now? Ellie asked, her voice quivering. Yes, we need to act fast. Could you sign the consent forms? Ellie nodded mechanically, her hands shaking as she signed the documents. Her mind understood the urgency, but her heart couldn't fully accept it. She needed to see Noah. Let me see my son, Dr. Carter led Ellie to the treatment room. Noah lay on the bed, pale, his right side swollen, covered in bandages. Various monitors were connected to his small body. Mom, it hurts. Noah's weak voice reached Ellie, and she immediately rushed to his side, taking his hand. It's okay, Noah. Mom's here now. Everything will be fine. Ellie's voice trembled with emotion. Noah nodded faintly, closing his eyes again. A nurse nearby explained that he was drowsy from the anesthesia, but they'd given him enough to keep him stable. Ellie stood there, fighting back her tears, when another woman approached her, a hospital administrative staff member. Miss Morrison, we need to go over insurance information and complete some procedures before the surgery. Ellie reluctantly left Noah's side and followed the woman to the administrative office. As she provided her insurance details, the staff member hesitated before speaking. Miss Morrison, your insurance will require a partial out-of-pocket payment for the surgery. The emergency surgery and hospitalization will amount to approximately $155,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. Ellie's chest tightened. She couldn't believe it. $155,000. Can I make payments in installments? Ellie asked, trying to remain calm. Of course, we offer payment plans, but we require an initial payment of at least $3,000 before the surgery can proceed. Ellie felt the world spinning around her. She didn't have that kind of money. Her bank account barely had $1,000, and after paying for rent and living expenses, she had little to no savings. Her credit card was already maxed out. We can't schedule the surgery until the payment is confirmed, the staff member added apologetically. Ellie's heart dropped. How could she come up with the money? She stepped out of the office, feeling desperate. Her mind raced to ask friends for help. No one could lend her that much money. Her ex-husband, Greg, had been unreachable for months. Her only option, her pride and fear pushed aside, was to call her mother. Ellie hesitated, but then picked up her phone, calling her mother, Deborah. Hello? Ellie, this is a surprise. Ellie's voice cracked. Mom, Noah's been in an accident. I don't have enough for the surgery costs. Could you lend me some money? On the other end, Deborah paused. Then, she sighed deeply. Accident? What happened? Is he all right? Ellie quickly filled her mother in. He was hit by a car. There's internal bleeding and liver damage. He needs surgery, but they won't start without $3,000 up front. There was a long silence. I'm sorry, Ellie, but I can't provide the money right now. Ellie's heart sank. What do you mean? Noah's life is at stake. Her voice cracked with frustration. I just promised to fund Emma's study abroad in England. You understand, don't you? We can't miss this opportunity. Ellie's heart shattered. Emma's study abroad? Over Noah's life? Her voice trembled. Can't Emma wait a little longer? Noah's life is at stake. Ellie screamed, but Deborah's tone remained cold. You've always managed on your own, Ellie. You'll figure it out. Ellie's hand trembled as she ended the call. She collapsed into a chair in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. The weight of her mother's cold rejection crushed her. Mom, please, Ellie whispered in the empty hallway, her body shaking. Ellie sat in the hallway, feeling drained and helpless. The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, and she looked up to see Dr. Carter approaching her. Miss Morrison? Dr. Carter said softly, his expression serious. We're ready to begin the surgery. Ellie, still numb from the phone call with her mother, nodded mechanically. Her mind was racing. How could she afford this? But she couldn't let Noah down. She stood up, brushing away the tears that were still fresh on her cheeks, and made her way to the operating room. As the surgical team prepared Noah for the operation, Ellie stood at his side, her hand firmly clutching his. Everything is going to be okay, Noah. Mom is right here, Ellie whispered, trying to soothe her son. As the anesthesia took effect, Noah's weak smile was the only response she received before he drifted into unconsciousness. She watched him for a few moments, her heart breaking. Please, don't leave me, Noah, she thought desperately. She could feel the weight of the situation, the terror of losing him and the growing frustration of not knowing where to turn for help. Ellie left the operating room reluctantly as the team got to work. She walked down the hallway, her thoughts swirling in a haze of worry and confusion. What now? That's when she noticed something strange. A familiar face appeared at the far end of the hallway. Deborah, her mother, stood there, out of breath and clearly distressed. Ellie's heart skipped a beat. What was her mother doing here? Mom, what's wrong? Ellie asked, her voice laced with surprise and confusion. Deborah's face was pale, her usually pristine appearance disheveled. She looked as if she had been running, and the tears in her eyes were unmistakable. Noah, the surgery. I'm so sorry, Ellie, Deborah said, her voice shaking with emotion. I couldn't stand the thought of losing him. Ellie's mind was in chaos. Her mother? Here? Now? After everything? She didn't know what to feel: anger, confusion, relief, or something else entirely. But she couldn't deny that seeing her mother here, in front of her, made something stir inside her. You came for Noah? After everything you said? Ellie's voice was trembling with disbelief. Deborah nodded, her eyes full of remorse. I couldn't let you go through this alone. Ellie felt a rush of emotions: relief, disbelief, anger swirling inside her. She couldn't even look at her mother without feeling the sting of past hurt. Why now, Mom? After all this time? Why didn't you help me before? Ellie's voice broke as she said the words. Deborah lowered her head, her hands trembling. I made a terrible mistake, Ellie. I thought I was helping you by keeping up appearances. I was wrong. Ellie struggled to process everything she was hearing. The woman who had once been her rock, the one who had demanded perfection from her, was now admitting her own flaws, her own mistakes. You lied to me, Mom. You lied to all of us. Ellie's voice was raw with emotion. Deborah looked at her with tears in her eyes. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I was ashamed. Ellie closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of it all crashing down on her. Why had her mother hidden all this from her? I thought if I kept up the act, everything would be okay, that I wouldn't disappoint you. But you did, Ellie whispered, her voice barely audible. The two stood in silence for a moment before Rachel appeared, walking briskly toward them. She glanced at her mother and Ellie, and then nodded to Ellie. Ellie, we figured it out, Rachel said quietly. She took Ellie's hand, looking at their mother with a mix of sympathy and resolve. Mom went to the bank and arranged the payment for Noah's surgery. She couldn't say it before, but she's here for him now. Ellie turned to look at her mother. You did that for Noah? Deborah nodded, her eyes red and swollen. I couldn't lose him, Ellie. I failed. You? But I want to make things right. Ellie felt a knot in her chest. Maybe this was the beginning of something different. Maybe it was time to heal. I don't know what to say, Mom. I really don't. Ellie looked down at the floor for a moment before meeting her mother's gaze again. But thank you. Rachel took Ellie's hand, leading her toward a seat in the hallway. We'll be okay, Ellie. I know it. As they sat down, Ellie could hear Noah's faint breathing in the operating room. Time seemed to slow as she waited, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't alone. For the first time in years, Ellie felt like she could trust the people around her again. The foundation of her family was beginning to shift, maybe not perfectly, but with hope. Hope that they could rebuild the bonds they had lost. Hours passed, and the waiting room became a place of quiet reflection. Ellie sat beside Rachel and Deborah, her eyes fixed on the door to the operating room, waiting for the news. Noah was still in surgery, but he was going to make it. The doctors had reassured them his youth and strength were on his side. Ellie's mind drifted back to the last few days, the fear and desperation that had gripped her heart. Her mother, her sister, and the lies. Everything felt like a whirlwind. But now, as she sat with her family, something was changing. Perhaps, just perhaps, this crisis could be a turning point. Deborah, who had been so proud and strong, now seemed fragile, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she waited with them. Ellie looked at her mother, her heart torn between anger and a growing sense of understanding. She had always felt like the strong one in their family, the one who had to carry everything on her shoulders. But now, Deborah had broken down, and in doing so, she had become real. Not perfect, not the pillar of strength that Ellie had always wished for, but she was here, doing her best. I'm sorry, Ellie. I really am, Deborah said quietly, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled as she spoke, and Ellie could see that for the first time, her mother truly meant it. I know, Mom. I know, Ellie replied, her voice soft. It was the first time in a long while that Ellie didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of everything by herself. Rachel, who had been quiet, spoke up next. You know, Ellie, I didn't understand what you were going through until now. I'm sorry for all the things I said, for not being there for you. Ellie looked at her sister, unsure how to respond. They had never been particularly close, and Rachel's words, though heartfelt, didn't fully erase the years of distance between them. But she knew that this was a step toward healing. We'll get through this together, Ellie, Rachel continued. You don't have to do everything alone anymore. Ellie gave a small nod, a lump forming in her throat. Her family, fractured as it was finally starting to come together. They were acknowledging the past, the mistakes, and their shared responsibility to move forward. Just as the conversation seemed to settle, a nurse came into the waiting area, her expression warm but serious. Miss Morrison? She called. Ellie stood up immediately, her heart racing. How is he? Ellie asked anxiously. The nurse smiled softly. Noah's surgery went very well. He's in recovery now, and it looks like his recovery will be a slow process, but the worst is over. You can see him in a bit, but he's still groggy from the anesthesia. Ellie exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She turned to her mother and sister, her eyes wide with relief. He's okay. He's going to be okay, she whispered, almost as if she couldn't believe it herself. Deborah stood up and hugged Ellie. Thank God, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank God, Rachel echoed, and they all shared a moment of quiet relief. Later that night, when Noah finally woke from the anesthesia, he was groggy, but aware enough to smile at his mother. Mom? His voice was weak, but his eyes were filled with recognition. Hey, sweetheart, Ellie said softly, brushing a lock of hair away from his forehead. How are you feeling? I'm okay, just really tired. Noah smiled faintly. It doesn't hurt too much anymore. Ellie's heart swelled with pride and relief. He was stronger than she gave him credit for. You're such a brave boy, Noah, she said, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. I'm so proud of you. Noah smiled again, then glanced over at the doorway where Deborah and Rachel were standing. Grandma? Aunt Rachel? Deborah and Rachel entered the room, both looking exhausted but happier than Ellie had seen them in a long time. I'm so glad you're awake, Noah, Deborah said, kneeling beside his bed. She took his hand gently. You gave us all quite a scare. Noah looked up at her, his eyes still heavy with sleep. Thanks, Grandma. Ellie watched as her mother, for the first time, looked at Noah with the kind of affection she had always craved. The wall that had separated them, the pride and distance, was beginning to crumble. Later that night, when the family was gathered in the waiting area, the atmosphere was different. There was still tension, still old wounds that needed healing, but for the first time in years, They felt like a family again. Deborah looked at Ellie and Rachel. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I want to start over. For real. This time, no more pretending. Ellie nodded, her heart full. I want that too, Mom. For all of us. Rachel smiled softly. I think we all do. Several months later, Noah had fully recovered, and Ellie found herself standing at the edge of a new chapter in her life. She had learned to navigate the world with more confidence, with a sense of strength that she hadn't realized she possessed. The experience with Noah's accident had changed her, but so much more had shifted in her family. One evening, Ellie and Noah were sitting together at the dinner table, now settled into their cozy new apartment. The place wasn't grand, but it felt like home, and for Ellie, that was enough. I'm proud of you, Noah, Ellie said, her heart full. Noah had faced more challenges in the past few months than a boy his age should ever have to, but he had come through with more resilience than she could have imagined. Noah smiled at her, his eyes sparkling with a warmth she hadn't seen before. He had grown, in more ways than one. Thanks, Mom. Noah took a bite of his food and looked out the window at the city skyline. For the first time in a long while, he was truly content. Ellie's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. It was Rachel. Hey, Ellie. I've been thinking maybe we should do something fun this weekend? A family day out. Just us. What do you think? Ellie smiled. Family had been rebuilt. The fractures that had once felt like they would never heal were slowly mending, and she knew this was the beginning of something beautiful. That sounds like a great idea, Rachel, Ellie replied. She put the phone down and turned to Noah. What do you think? Want to spend the day with your family? Noah looked up, his eyes lighting up. I'd like that. Ellie couldn't help but smile. They were together now, and that was all that mattered. A few days later, the family Ellie, Rachel, Deborah, and Noah gathered for their family outing. They laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed each other's company in a way that felt genuine. It was different now. There were no walls between them anymore. As they walked through the park, enjoying the sunshine, Ellie felt a sense of peace. This was her new reality, one where her family had found their way back to each other. That night, Ellie sat on the couch, reflecting on everything that had happened. She had learned so much about herself, about her family, and about the strength that lay within her. I've got this, she whispered to herself, smiling. She had found her strength, her voice, and most importantly, her family. Noah, now back to his usual energetic self, walked up to her. Mom, I'm so glad we're together. Ellie pulled him into a hug, her heart full. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. As they sat together, watching the stars outside their window, Ellie knew that no matter what came next, they would face it as a family. Together, the hardships, the heartaches, and the challenges were behind them now. The future was bright, and it was theirs to shape. And so, the Morrison family, once broken and now healing, stood stronger than ever.